And my words be in the name of the living God, who is life-giver, pain-bearer, love-maker. What does resurrection mean to me? That was my task. What interesting offerings you've had before. But as I reflected on this question, it came to me that my public ministry as a priest over about 34 years has been overshadowed by two great fictions about resurrection. The first fiction is that the resurrection was a one-off miracle 2,000 years ago, which somehow proved that Jesus was God. The second fiction, linked to the first one, is that resurrection might be for us too, sometime in the future, beyond physical death, if only we do the right things in this life. And it seems to me that those two fictions have been forged into an orthodoxy which is built out of fear. I've sat in congregations where priests not far from here have stood up the front and told me in their sermons that unless I believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus, his body, after he was dead, unless I believe that totally literally, then I'm not a proper Christian. It's been weaponized, which is the worst thing you can do to any doctrine, because it's just then used to beat people with. And these two fictions are the source of much misconception about the Christian faith. They ensure that many otherwise thoughtful people don't give Christianity even a second look, because it's clear to them that if these fictions are true, then faith is absolutely no earthly use at all. It's quite literally pie in the sky when you die. So crucially, here's the thing we need to get to grips with. Crucially, for me at least, resurrection is something that God is doing all the time. God is doing resurrection all the time and everywhere. And it's the other side of incarnation. If incarnation is God constantly bringing things into being in this vast creative enterprise, which is the universe, then resurrection is the recreation of those things as they pass away and become reborn, renewed, transformed. Because the love which sparked the universe has never ceased giving itself in creation and recreation. That's pretty good news, I think. Couldn't get much better news than that. And it means that our salvation, the wide open spaces of freedom that God promises us, our salvation is not second-hand. It's not out of some supernatural transaction between God and Jesus 2,000 years ago. Instead, the historical Jesus has now become the cosmic Christ, and whose offer of new life in God is made to every living being at every moment. But here's the rub. There's always a rub, isn't there? Resurrection only happens to us after some sort of death. And before any final physical death, it's in the many smaller deaths and diminishments that we all experience as part of our lives as human beings. And that's what resurrection will come out of, those little deaths and diminishments. Perhaps an illness, maybe a long-term physical condition, or perhaps much more immediately a humiliation, an injustice done to us, a hurt or a wound inflicted by someone who loves us. And of course, sin, our failures, are also a kind of death. And often we don't negotiate these little deaths very well. Instead, we imagine ourselves victims of life's circumstances. Or we turn our anger outwards in a wild blaming of others, of what we perceive as having been done to us. Or mostly, and most of us do this, we cling to our pain because its very familiarity provides us with a bizarre sense of comfort and security. And we don't need to take the risk of letting it go. We really do have to die to experience resurrection. We have to go to the point of no return. We've got to have stopped clinging to the pain which provides that comfort. And we have to let go into God. As easy to say as it is hard to do. We have to fall through fear into love. One of the mystics said that, I can't remember which one, but it's very powerful. We have to fall through fear into love. And we believe that Jesus identifies with us at all these points of vulnerability and powerlessness. And that if we allow ourselves to be, we are carried across from death to life by a love and a grace which is stronger than anything else we can know. And here's another crucial thing, which again we find very hard to accept. None of this, not one bit, can be done by our own efforts. Resurrection cannot be earned by our own merits or our attempts at being pure or our attempts at being perfect. It is pure, unearned grace. And what keeps us most from this dying is the ego, the false self, and the fear that the ego produces inside us at the thought that it might have to go. More than anything else, this is what keeps us from the new life on offer. It produces our deepest resistances to life, a restrictiveness about how we operate, and a huge defensiveness towards other people. And it shows us more than anything else who the real enemy to life is. The enemy is me. I am the enemy to life. So resurrection is not a corpse brought back to life 2,000 years ago. The resurrection of Jesus, so intriguing in its strangeness in the Gospels, is a sign, a statement of what God is doing always and everywhere in the universe, including ourselves, a constant process of dying and being reborn, which we are invited into. Resurrection is life transformed beyond the bounds of physical death. It is love at its most potent and most vulnerable. It is grace at the depth of the universe, keeping all that God has made in love and alive forever. And here's the thing, no dead ends. In the universe, there are no dead ends. All is redeemed and transformed. As Teilhard de Chardin said, we are ever renewed in a constant stream of becoming. And this stream is going on all the time, whether we recognize it or not. Deep there, underneath our lives, a huge richness of life and energy and power. And much of the time we're simply unaware of it because we're so busy getting on with our own plans for the lives we think we have. And what's the way in? What's the best way of connecting to this stream of life and energy? Well, I think the only way really is contemplation. Lives devoted to setting time aside to connect with that stream of grace and energy and life, which is God at the depths of our being and the heart of the universe. Time set aside to connect to that current, that flow, which is there at the depth of our being, of every single one of us. And I think that time aside is really non-negotiable if we want to connect to that stream. I just want to finish with some words from Richard Rohr, which I find difficult to better, really. about resurrection and the miracle of resurrection. He says, if we are to speak of miracles, the most miraculous thing of all is that God uses the very thing that would normally destroy you, the tragic, the sorrowful, the painful, or the unjust, to transform and enlighten you. Now you are indestructible. And as I said earlier on, there are no dead ends, he says. This is what we mean when we say we are saved by the death and resurrection of Jesus. This is not a one-time cosmic transaction, but the constant pattern of all growth and change. Jesus indeed saving the world by guiding us through all would-be deaths to a life that is always bigger than death. Amen.